Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Retro Warriors episode 89.
Woo!
As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by resident old bastard Chris Saturn.
Hello.
I'm getting really fast at it.
You are.
I'm like the Micro Machines guy of this podcast intro.
You know, only people who care about retro video games remember the Micro Machines guy. What was his name? John Machida?
His name wasn't Micro Machine Guy. Wait, John Machida is suspiciously close to John Micro Machine. So I feel like
John Micro Machida.
That's his middle name.
Yeah.
John Micro Machida.
Micro is my middle name.
Saturn, you're going to draw a name out of that hat.
Yes.
Every week we give away a game to one of our patrons. You can go find our Patreon at patreon.com/retrowarriors. And this week we're giving away a copy of Human Resource Machine because last week we gave a copy of World of Goo away, so we might as well.
Might as well just carry that.
Keep
trend.
going on through that.
You'll never believe it.
Huh.
It's going to George.
George, our newest patron, whose name I just put in there.
Yeah.
All the other ones are little tiny strips. His is a whole 8x10 piece of paper, so I don't think it gave him an unfair advantage,
No.
but that's...
His is actually on a Zelda cartridge that you just threw in there.
Yeah, that's what I use. We just draw off of NES cartridges.
Yeah.
George, not only thank you for being our newest patron, but
Yeah.
you're also going to get a copy of Human Resource Machine. Check your Patreon messages, which is how we're going to send it to you. And if you support us on Patreon, you can check out all of our great things like Classic Corner, which I think the newest episode was... It's DuckTales 2,
Yes.
I believe.
That's the most recent one that we put up.
That was funny.
It's good.
Andrew did a duck impression in the middle of it. So even if you don't care about DuckTales, but you want to hear Andrew do an impression of a duck,
It's important.
it's the thing you can listen to.
You didn't think you wanted that. but
Until
you
I heard
did.
it. Yeah. Best part is he was like, I don't think I can. And then he just did it. And I was like, no, you can. You shouldn't.
Right.
But you can.
And we've got a special Classic Corner coming up, too.
We do. Last week, our camera, in air quotes, aka my iPhone,
Yes.
messed up and did not record the video version of the show. So our video patrons got to vote on the next episode of Classic Corner. And of course, I only included terrible, atrocious, awful games in the vote.
Because we hate Andrew.
And it was a tie between Fester's Quest and E.T. on Atari 2600. So he decided, I was like, just flip a coin, man. And he goes, no,
He's like, no, I'm going to tackle both of
I'm
these.
going to double feature Fester's Quest and E.T.
I don't know that he got more than 5 minutes into either one.
He tried.
I know he tried.
God knows he tried.
Yeah. The man always tries. I give him credit. No matter how horrible the thing he is approaching is for Classic Corner, he gives it his all.
Anyway, if you do want to go listen to Classic Corner, again, it is a reward for any tier, any reward tier on our Patreon, patreon.com/retro warriors.
I think we have 1 or 2 episodes for free now, right?
Of Classic Corner?
Or we had one at one point?
We've had them tacked on the end of shows in the past,
Yeah.
but I don't think they're... I don't remember what episode that was. Or
Yeah,
I would
me
say.
either.
Also, more housekeeping. We did hit our second milestone again after recently dropping below
we double hit it.
We've hit it twice.
Yeah.
That's how good we are at hitting milestones. So thank you to our lovely patrons. You can already go read our newest written piece, which is Othello versus Othello by Saturn.
Yeah. It was my fanfic of Kramer versus Kramer.
Please don't say that ever. You can't. It is a review of the Switch version of Othello as compared to the Atari 2600 version, which is very good. And you don't have to be a patron to go read that. You can just go to our website, retrowarriors.net. Yeah. Also, more housekeeping. We did a guest spot on another podcast. I know we cheated on you, our faithful listeners. We were on another show. I know it's horrible. We were on episode 89 of The Reformed Gamers. We're about 50 minutes in if you want to just jump to our part, but you shouldn't. You should listen to the whole show because it's a good show.
So yeah, after you listen to episode 89 of our show, go ahead and jump over to episode 89 of their show.
So it is done by my good friend Logan and his co-host. So do please go listen to that. They're great guys, and it was really super duper fun being on their show and talking about retro games.
It was a blast.
Anyway, all that out of the way. My week was mostly dealing with a sick kid and a funeral and just adult shit like that.
Sounds like a pain in the ass.
It was not enjoyable.
Right.
I did, however, after the funeral, go pick up Tenchu 1 and 2 at Movie Trading Company. So it wasn't a horrible day all around.
That's what you do after funerals.
You know, I got them for $10 a piece in Movie Trading Company, which is pretty. It's below market rate or whatever. You know, I I also picked up Binding of Isaac.
Yeah.
Because it comes with a manual. Yeah. I spent $40
because I showed you my copy last week,
and
you were like, I have to have this now.
Well, I was in Walmart waiting on medicine for my daughter, and they called in the prescription at 3:00. I showed up at 5:15, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's not ready yet."
Oh, you wanted that today?
I was like, one children's serving of amoxicillin antibiotics is not ready in 2 hours and 15 minutes. Well, we'll bump it up and get it done in a half hour. And I was like, that's bumped up?
Yeah.
That's how long it should take total.
Well, they're the only pharmacy within 100 miles of you.
I know.
So they get a little busy with all the goat medicine they have to prepare.
So I'm walking around and I see that they have it at Walmart, and it's already sold out on Amazon. It's getting hard to find. I imagine they're not going to do another print run of it.
There was a shit ton of copies at the GameStop I went to.
Really?
Today. Yeah.
Either way, I'm telling myself they're not going to do another print run, which they probably won't.
Yeah, well, if they do, they certainly won't include all the stickers and manuals and everything.
But I tried to distract myself, and I was walking around. I found this little purse, this cute purse thing that was like a tablet holder, and I called Courtney, and I was like, hey, I think you'll like this. So she was like, all right, get me that. And I'm like, all right, that killed 30 seconds. I'm going to buy Binding of Isaac now. So I go up to the counter, and the lady's like, honey, do you want to buy that purse? I was like, yes, please yell it louder now. I go, can I get a game out of the case? And she goes, no. And then I was like, is this banter? Are we bantering? Or you really mean no? Because I would like the game. But, yeah, I mean.
Well, they lost the keys years ago.
That's
why they still have copies.
Yeah, that's why. We still got sealed Super Nintendos, but we ain't got no keys. So I got the game. I came home. I played it. And
seriously, if we went to a store that still had sealed Super Nintendo games,
I'd be breaking some glass.
We'd break the case.
I do want to say I played a good amount of the game. And as I said before, I don't dislike the game. Right. I have my own issues with the
aesthetic
themes and the aesthetic of the game, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. It takes a little bit for me to get past the whole overly religious, gross out, pseudo horror kind of comedy thing they have going on. I did finally beat the game. I finished a run. You know, it's a game you play millions of times over and over, but I started unlocking characters and kind of really getting into it. And it's really is, I think it really says something about the game that I very much dislike the aesthetic a lot. And I still have played several hours of it already. Like, that really is a testament to the game.
I have always been a big fan of its Robotron-style control scheme. Yeah. Which I will give a chance to any game that uses the Robotron-style control scheme.
Well, now, on in gamepad mode, I don't use the right stick. I use the buttons to aim.
Oh, yeah, that's
because fine. It's four-way aiming anyway. In the stick, I keep trying to do diagonals and it screws me up. Yeah. Unless I get the item that lets me do 360, and then I just do whatever. But I'm really, really thoroughly enjoying the game. Probably going to play more of it. Honestly, just surprised me. I did just want to say that it's one of those games that I very much dislike the aesthetic and still am very much enjoying the game.
It's a good game. I have poured plenty of time into it on both PC and now on my Switch.
Now, if it was like a different aesthetic, it'd be like amazing game for me. But I have my personal issues with it.
I do like the original version. I like the presentation of the original version better, but the gameplay in the new expanded edition way there's so much more to do.
Because originally it was like, okay, here's a fun kind of Zelda dungeon-esque shooter, whatever. The new one, there's so much nuance and hidden stuff. It feels more like a Spelunky or something than it does, just with the amount of things to discover. So it's really enjoying it. I also did want to touch again really briefly on Sonic 2 because last week we called the soundtrack a masterpiece, which is an understatement. I feel bad because we're not music people.
I enjoy I own several game soundtracks.
Right, but we don't know how to critique music in a meaningful way. No. So all we can do is be like, it's really good. Yeah. So it's a bummer to me that we don't have that skill. Right. Because I was listening to the Sonic 2 soundtrack today while I was at home with Harper. And I put it on just on a whim. Someone on NeoGAF mentioned blah, 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 Sega soundtracks. And I was like, I'm going to go listen to that while we're hanging out playing with Play-Doh. Because it's what I do for hours and hours a day is play with Play-Doh. And I'm really good at it.
Yeah, because adulting.
So I put on Sonic 2 and I'm like playing with Play-Doh and dancing and hanging out. And Harper's dancing through the whole soundtrack. She's going crazy for the Sonic 2 soundtrack, and it's just so damn good.
Don't let her get too excited about Casino Night Zone. You don't want her to develop a gambling problem.
This could be an issue. Is when ever since Casino Night Zone when I was 16 months old, I just couldn't stay off the craps.
Yeah, that's the one. It's craps.
Two specific tracks, Oil Ocean and Metropolis. Both just fucking amazing tracks. Just really, really awesome music. So I did, for people out there who aren't huge Sega people, just go listen to the soundtrack. It's so,
I remember as a kid, I had, there's that port on the front of the first model Genesis, the headphone port.
Yeah.
I had plugged that using one of my sister's cables into the line in on her stereo and made myself cassette soundtracks to several games, including Sonic 2.
Yeah. But, Sega music in general is just, Sega Sound Team does amazing work. But then the Sonic 3 soundtrack came on after that. I didn't like it nearly as much as Sonic 2.
There's some tracks on Sonic 3 that I absolutely love.
There are some tracks, but Sonic 2, granted, this is YouTube. It could have been a bad rip. Maybe it just sounded wrong. Maybe the levels are off. Who knows? So no, but don't quote me on that. Sonic 3
and it's coming out of a Genesis, sounding, so it could have just sounded
some
like
guy
garbage.
Just held a phone up to a Genesis and was like YouTube.
Yeah.
But just really awesome soundtrack. Tonight after the show, I'm gonna play some Sega 3D classics with some headphones on because I usually just turn music all the way down and I don't listen to anything when I play games, and it's bad to just sit there in silence.
I let YouTube just autoplay a video for me today, or not today, 2 days ago, for the first time in a very long time. I'm usually very, very meticulous about my YouTubing.
Right.
About making sure that I pick only videos that I'm interested in and not clickbait bullshit.
Otherwise, it'll be a month and a half from now and you'll be in your underwear with a huge long beard and you won't be in front of the computer in front of a YouTube hole.
Right. So I let YouTube try to autoplay one video.
Yeah.
And it came up with this video of this dude testing out whether or not you could lock a Sonic and Knuckles cartridge into another Sonic and Knuckles cartridge. And it was like this 8-minute video, and it's great. And the guy, he put in his due diligence. I give him credit for that. It did work.
It did?
And then he connected...
It just played Sonic and Knuckles, right?
Yeah, and then he connected a Sonic 2, I think, to the Sonic and Knuckles that was connected to the Sonic and Knuckles, and then it acted as if it was Sonic 2 and Knuckles. So I'm guessing that one of the Sonic and Knuckles just decided to be a pass-through.
I have 2 Sonic and Knuckles.
You need to do this now.
We're doing this after the show.
Do you have a Genesis?
Yeah, but I don't have any cables for it.
Well, you're not doing this after the show.
Does it not work on the Retron?
No, Sonic and Knuckles does not work on the Retron.
It does too. They updated it.
They updated it, but it works... It wouldn't work for that because it doesn't actually read the hardware for Sonic and Knuckles. It just recognizes what it is and then emulates it.
I'm doing it anyway.
All right.
We can take out my Genesis. We just can't plug it up to anything.
So what do you call it at that point? Is it Sonic and Knuckles and Knuckles?
It's if it was 2 Sonic and Knuckles Ziz and Sonic 2, then it's Sonic cubed and Knuckles squared.
Yeah.
That's what it... No, wait, because it's Sonic 2. That's 2 Sonics.
So Sonic 2 squared and Knuckles squared.
No, square is 2.
Yeah.
It'd be 4.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Sonic 2 squared. So 2.
Oh, Sonic 2. Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah.
I was just thinking Sonic the 4th.
Yeah.
And
you
Knuckles squared.
Well, let's just... That's
by the transitive property, they mean the same thing. I think we've probably just embarrassed ourselves mathematically to a very high degree. So we're going to be done with it.
We should ask the number file team to come up with some answers on that.
Saturn, what did you have this week?
I hacked my Wii U. Actually, I bought a separate Wii U to hack.
Really?
Yeah.
How'd that go?
Really well.
Really?
It is really straightforward and smooth these days.
Now, let me ask you this. How... interface wise, how is it? Is it kind of janky like Homebrew Channel, or is it super smooth?
It looks like it's not hacked.
It looks legit.
Yeah, all the applications that you install as Wii U channels.
Really?
And they just run that way.
See, that's what I would... Oh, God. Sorry, hit my mic. That's what I wanted is... Because on the Wii, you install Homebrew Channel, but then you have to open Homebrew Channel and then open the app, and it's kind of extra steps, and it's kind of janky.
There's still a Homebrew launcher channel that will install to your Wii U menu. And you can use that to launch like emulators and stuff. But there's so little homebrew available for the Wii U.
Right.
Partially because it's not been out as long as the Wii, and partially because it just wasn't as successful as the Wii.
All 9 guys working on it.
Right. So I don't expect that to get much bigger. There's a good Atari Link Simulator for it, though.
Why?
So thank God we took care of that one.
You can finally play Gauntlet 3 as the nerd. I want to do that so bad. I'm going to have to get that on my RetroPie. You get to play as a nerd, Saturn.
Yeah, that's good.
It's awesome.
So, yeah, they other than that, somebody discovered that it is not difficult at all to just straight up download the installation files from the eShop.
Really?
Yeah. And then you can copy them to it. But what I did was I ripped all of my discs. Every Wii U game I have, I ripped and I installed to the hard drive. That way, I don't have to touch my discs anymore. They can sit properly on the shelf. And
this is what I love, and we'll get into this because it's related to this week's topic. But this is what I love about being a collector: is you fight tooth and nail to get all this shit, and then you fight as hard as you can to never have to touch it.
Yes, you're like, oh, thank God, I got this ultra rare game. I'm gonna go emulate it.
Now I can never touch it, and I can play it on my computer, and then look at the cartridge and go, yes.
I'm so glad I got this. Now let me go play the shitty PS4 port.
Anyway, news.
Little bit of news.
Yep.
What do you got?
I have a bunch of stuff, so you go ahead.
One, the video game historian put out an excellent video
on Bleem.
I
saw that.
And I haven't to it.
I haven't watched the video, but yes, sorry. I think his name's Norman.
We beat you to that one.
We beat you to it. So
that
suck
was
it.
Us.
That's we win
that
the
was
race.
All us.
Unfortunately, Retronauts beat us at everything else. So that's what.
No, we beat them to something, didn't we?
Bubble Bobble, I think.
Yeah, Classic Kortner beat them to Bubble Bobble, not us.
It. Yeah, Andrew beat him to it.
Also, the long lost PC version of Plumbers Don't Wear Ties has been unearthed.
Why? I thought we were doing like a real news segment. What the fuck are you doing here?
No, seriously, everybody thought that it was gone.
Yeah,
because
it was on the
3DO.
I always want to think it's a Sega Saturn game. I guess because it's FMV, but whatever.
You think Sega CD, not Sega Saturn. But yeah,
that's what I meant. CD. I'm sorry.
It was Segmeg.
The Segmeg.
Yeah, so the PC version had been thought to be long lost, and some dude was going through a catalog of what university libraries have across the country, and just happened to find this one library in this one university that said that they had Plumbers Don't Wear Ties, and his thought was, their inventory isn't accurate.
So wait a minute. What you're saying is this game was released, but just literally no one has a copy.
Yeah. It was released, but in so limited quantity, and also it did so poorly that there's almost no documentation of it. Like there's some reviews from that era.
Yeah.
Of people talking about how terrible it was. But
then talking about how they destroyed their copy and every copy they ever encountered after that.
And so he contacted somebody who went to that school.
Yeah.
And they went to that library. And the game was there.
Oh my God.
So they checked it out and they mailed it to him. And he was able to rip the data from it, but it was in such poor condition that the actual disc itself wouldn't play. But he was able to get the data off and get it in a playable format.
Right, make copy.
Yeah, the way that it works is it's just a collection of WAV files and bitmaps.
Oh my God.
Because the game is just a slideshow as it is.
It's just FMV.
But no, it's not even FMV, it's slideshow.
Well, yeah, it's V.
Yeah. It's PowerPoint, the video game. And they didn't even bother to like make a custom file type or something. It's all bitmaps. So you can just open them up without even bothering
and look at the naked lady.
Yeah, and the PC version had actual nudity in it.
Oh wow.
Unlike the 3DO version,
which was
and so the guy not only preserved it and then sent it back to the library, presumably,
right?
He also created a DOSBox environment with pre-made batch files to load it and let it play properly on a modern PC, and then he submitted it to archive.org, who has added it to their archive.
Oh God!
So now the PC version of Plumbers Don't Wear Ties is not only recovered, but properly archived.
I know what I'm making you do after the show.
I already tried it, and that's as far as I'm getting. I'm done.
I have some actual news that people give a shit about. First up, StarCraft Remastered was announced, which I'm very excited for.
I'm so stoked.
I love StarCraft, and I am terrible at it.
I played so much StarCraft online back in 99, 2000. I had some friends who were expert level players, like not maybe Korean tournament level players, but very, very good players. they could log in, random match on BNet, and win probably 3/4 of the time.
Right.
And they taught me how to play. And they were like, let's start you on Zerg, because that's the easy one.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned how to play Zerg, and then they're like, all right, now let's move to Terran. I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
I just kept trying to do the same things I already learned, and they're like, no, stop that. And I was like, nope, you've overloaded my brain.
You have to do
this is all I've got. And so I only ever learned Zerg, and I cannot play as Tosser Terran.
Always, I play, like, if I'm playing multiplayer, I only play Protoss.
Yeah.
And, like, if I'm playing campaign or against bots or whatever, I play, the humans, the Terrans. Yeah. But, I'm not good at any of it at all.
But the original version of StarCraft is being made free to play.
Uh-huh.
And
wait a minute, you mean the original version of the original StarCraft?
Well, the original Brood War. Well, actually, the newest patch that is about to come out of the original StarCraft plus Brood War is going to be free to play. It's going to be free to download and free to play.
I thought they were making the new StarCraft game, StarCraft 2, was going free to play.
No.
Oh, okay, I was mistaken.
StarCraft 2 still going to cost money.
Mm-hmm.
The new HD remaster will also cost money.
Mm-hmm.
But the original StarCraft is going free to play. They haven't said if they're going to add ads or anything like that in it. I can't imagine they would, since there are plenty of people who did pay for it over the years.
Yeah.
But it'll be...
I mean, who doesn't own a copy of StarCraft?
Right.
Literally everyone just...
Right?
So you have one laying around, I promise.
They don't let you buy it anymore. You could still buy it through the Battle.net store up until this announcement, and they took it down because they don't want somebody to buy it right before it goes free to play.
Right.
So you'll be able to download it, play it, and any saved replays, saved maps, saved files, anything from the original will play on the HD remaster and vice versa.
Oh, that's cool.
And they will play against each other too. So if
whoa, wait a minute.
So if I bought HD remaster and you were like, fuck them, I'm not giving them money.
Right.
I'm not buying into their racket, and you still had the original, we could play against each other.
But if that's crazy.
And the original is being updated to now have native support for Windows 10 and the newest Mac OS X.
Mechanically, I don't know what kind of wizard they have working at Blizzard that's making this shit happen.
Yeah.
Whoever's programming this is insane.
Right.
Or they've just been working on it since Brood War, and it took this long because it's that complicated.
Yeah, they did mention that they had to intentionally add in some of the bad AI.
I heard that, basically it's kind of like going back a patch.
Right.
Is pretty much what's happening.
Yeah,
we're probably going back a million patches because I assume it's still patched regularly. But
no, it hasn't been patched in years.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
I feel like Diablo 2 still gets fucking patches. I log in every once in a while and it's like, there's a patch, and I'm like, of what? Why?
I think the last Star 1 patch was in 08.
Oh, wow.
Something
Even
like
then, 08 is a long time.
That's almost 10 years after the original release.
Yeah.
But also, as part of that, they also killed Battle.net as a name.
Whoa, hey, what?
Yeah.
I'm the one that brought the news to the show, and I didn't know any of this shit. I was just like, oh, cool, StarCraft remaster, whatever.
I'm such a huge StarCraft fan. As soon as I heard all this, I just dug into all the news.
So what's
I
happening
could
in Battle.net?
It is just being renamed to Blizzard.
Okay, but Diablo 2 still works because that's my life.
Yes, it will still work. And in the classic games, in Diablo 2, and at least until it's patched in StarCraft, it'll still say connecting to Battle.net.
Yeah.
But in everything else, it is being patched to just say connecting to Blizzard. The separate Battle.net application has also been renamed to Blizzard.
I go back to Diablo 2 the way that recovered alcoholics walk by a bar and still kind of glance in the window. Like that's still like, oh, this is still here, huh?
Yeah. They still sell booze.
A couple games announced from Atlas. They're close enough to retro that I'm okay talking about them. Atlas 3DS remakes, Radiant Historia, Perfect Chronology, which is a remake of Radiant Historia on DS. What? I know.
I thought it was a remake of Darkwing Duck.
And this is a weird naming. This is a remake of Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey called Shin Megami Tensei Deep Strange Journey.
Yeah, I saw that.
So Atlas is bringing those both to Japan.
Yep.
And there's currently no plans of bringing them to the United States. Well, I don't want to say no plans. There's no announcement that they will be coming stateside. I feel like they will, but I don't know.
They've been really good about releasing stuff over here lately. I have some faith.
I own both the originals. Radiant Historia was a fun game that I don't think I finished, but very enjoyable. Shin Megami Tensei, I'm just not that hardcore. I'm not hardcore enough to.
I would say both of those are more likely to come out over here than Dragon Quest X.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Also, from Square Enix, Romancing Saga 3 is coming to Vita, iOS, and Android.
Yep.
Again, no U.S. announcement, but they did still say that 2 is still coming to the U.S., at least according to Kawazu on Twitter.
Well, it's already out.
Is it out?
On Android and iOS. It's
Then
been
what
out
was
for
he
like a year.
About? I guess
think
the Vita version?
The Vita version was announced, but hasn't yet come out.
Hasn't come yet. Yeah. Okay. And this is the biggest news of the week, and I'm very excited about it.
I don't know how I missed Romancing Saga 3.
Second Densetsu Collection.
Yes. We talked about that last week.
Is being ported by M2. They're the ones doing it.
Oh, nice.
So that's massive.
Now, I heard that they had added some extra functionality to Seiken 3 as part of the collection.
I'm unaware of that.
It's going to have 3-player support.
I'm unaware of that.
Whereas the original did not. Now, Seiken 2 always had 3 players.
Now, that's exciting because that means that they're hacking the ROM a little bit. And while you're in there, why don't you make it English too? That'd be great if you could do that. Yeah, so that's very exciting. We absolutely love M2 here at the Retro Warriors headquarters.
Yeah.
Very excited that they're doing that.
Here at Retro Warriors World News headquarters.
Here at the compound, which is what I call it. I really do hope that comes stateside, and
absolutely.
Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see.
I'm not gonna put any money on that one.
I'm saying this. I'll buy it in Japanese. I'll do it.
I'd consider it, but
I'll absolutely do it.
I already own 2 of those games in English and 1 in Japanese.
I think it's extra exciting for me because I've never really played any of them. I played a few minutes and I was like, I feel like you really do need to play a multiplayer because everyone goes on like, I played it with my little brother and my whatever, and I play it by myself. I'm like, it's a cutesy hack and slash, whatever.
Secret of Mana especially is a great multiplayer, which is unfortunate because you have to play through 6 hours of single player before you unlock your second character.
I remember sitting down to play that one with Courtney. I was like, we're going to do this. And I convinced Courtney to come in there and play this game. And I was
and then you spent 6 hours just trying to find the second player.
No, I spent 20 minutes and then looked it up and went, fuck that. And we did something else because we're adults and we have shit to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, unless you had any more news, that's the news segment.
I don't know how I forgot to put StarCraft on my list.
Yeah,
I anxiously looked into that for hours.
Yeah. This week we were gonna do Tenchu.
Yeah, and then you played it.
Then I played it. No, I do still want to do Tenchu, but between sick kid and funeral and everything else, I didn't have time to sit down, and it just didn't happen. So we are gonna specifically talk about our personal histories of game collecting. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this is one of those things that's very self-indulgent, but I do want it to be said because a lot of times whenever we talk about this retro stuff on the show, it's important for people to know where we're coming from.
Yeah. What our personal context is.
When we got into things, what we're into, what we know about, what we don't know about, and why it's important to us. So
because if your first game was Modern Warfare 2,
you're going to have a very different perspective.
And I'm telling you that you should really play Bubble Bobble, you should know not to trust me.
Right. Yeah. Right. Or if your favorite game is Call of Duty and I'm saying, you need to play Black Ops because there's a port of Zork in it, then...
Which Black Ops was that?
The first Black Ops, because the menu was you strapped in this chair and you could break free and go over to this computer and play a full fucking version of Zork.
Nice.
And I played a lot of Zork with a PS3 controller.
Nice. Oh, God.
And then eventually I got a keyboard and hooked it up, and it was very fun.
Yeah.
Anyway...
PS3. How awful was that?
I don't remember. I feel like maybe it didn't support the controller. It had to have.
I don't know.
I feel like I remember being like, fuck this, I'm getting a keyboard after a long time. But I could be mistaken. It's been a number of years now, which is sad to think that one of the later Call of Duty games came out years ago.
Yeah, because Black Ops 2 was in the launch year of the Wii U.
Yeah, Black Ops 2, I have that on Wii U.
A dead console now.
Yeah, the Wii U version of Black Ops 2 was the best version, but we're not gonna get into that.
Let's just talk Call of Duty this week.
It's retro.
That'll certainly retain our listeners.
Oh shit, is it retro?
No. Well, the first one is.
Oh god.
Yeah, the first one definitely is. The first one was on PS2.
No. I meant Modern Warfare.
Oh, no.
I meant modern Call of Duty,
that was
original Call of Duty.
Modern Warfare, that was Call of Duty 4. That was 360. It was an 08?
So next year.
Something like that.
Next year is retro.
Yeah.
Anyway, I want to start because I think mine's shorter and maybe a little more concise than yours. I know yours is probably this meandering tale of boyhood.
It's just going to be a bunch of Dragon Quest.
It's actually, for your section, I just wrote Dragon Quest Slimes, Dragon Quest King Slimes. Oh my God, look, a metal slime. Also Lolo. Oh my God, Dragon Quest. So that's what I put in for your notes there.
I love King Slimes.
The first time that I really remember being like, hey, I want to go buy this old video game because I want to have it and I want to collect it, and I feel like it's an important thing that I want to have historically. I was around probably 15, and I went to Funko Land and I bought my own NES. And I remember my brother still had his NES, but just like when I was growing up, I could touch it when he decided I wasn't allowed to touch it.
Right.
And
so this was
13 years ago.
Okay, so they probably were about $30-$40 in that area.
Yeah, I think I paid $50-$60 and got it and 3 games.
Okay.
So I walk into Funko Land.
All Trog.
Yeah, Trog, and Trog. I go in there to pick them up, and I just kind of like grabbed I was like, I want an NES, and then just grabbed 3 games that looked cool. Yeah. And I grabbed Ghosts and Goblins, Legend of Zelda, which was cheap at the time because the label was like melted off, so it was like $1,
Gold card or gray card?
Gold card. And Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt, because you gotta have Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt.
I don't.
What?
Yeah, I don't have it anymore.
What?
I got rid of my copy.
What?
I have separate Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt.
What the fuck is happening?
But I don't have Super Mario.
I'm gonna give you a copy of Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt before you leave. I got 2, so you just take fucking one of mine. And
I had a copy of Mario Duck Hunt Track and Field for a little while there.
Yeah.
But I was like, I don't use my power pad.
Who
Fuck
doesn't
that.
have Mario Duck Hunt?
I got rid of it intentionally.
That's why. Whoa. What?
Yeah. I decided I wanted separate Mario and Duck Hunt.
That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard you say.
Yeah, it was just, I was this point where I was like, I don't want collection games. I just want individuals. And that was also when I got rid of my Ninja Gaiden trilogy and got the 3 individual Ninja Gaiden games.
That was fucking dumb, wasn't it?
That was the dumbest shit ever.
Anyway, I pick it up, I took it home, and I'd never played Ghosts and Goblins. Huh. I played the shit out of all 3 games, and then over the next few years, just kind of picked games up as I saw them, because this was back whenever you could still walk in a movie trading company and buy like 10 games for $50 on NES, and it was like, oh,
less.
Yeah, it was like, oh, Dragon Quest 3 and Super Mario Brothers 3 and whatever
Not
other
Dragon
shit you're
Quest
finding. Okay, you get what I'm saying. But the first time, because I mean that was less like, oh, this is going to be a thing I collect for now, and more just like I want one in a few games and whatever.
And everybody's getting rid of them at this time.
But the first game that I remember really being like, hey, I need to go seek this game out. This is a retro game that I want to go purchase that I can't find anymore, and I have to go search for it. It's worse. It was Kung Fu Warriors.
Oh, God damn it.
On NES. And because I remember,
not even Kung Fu.
No, because Kung Fu Warriors is way better than Kung Fu. You kidding me?
At least Kung Fu is historically significant.
Kung Fu Warriors is significant. Okay, this is my trifecta of games on NES that everyone else hates and I love: Kung Fu Warriors, Trog, Milon's Secret Castle.
Dude, I appreciate Milon's Secret Castle.
It's a shit game.
It is, but it was a fun game.
That's my trifecta of games that like, oh, this is the shit that when people are like, well, what games do you like that no one else does because you like old shitty games? That's my 3. That's the ones. Anyway, I remember I got that NES and I was like, man, I remember playing this game. It was orange. It was Kung Fu something. And I made my mom drive me around to all of these different Funko Lands. And I found a copy for like $3.50, But that was the first time I remember going out of my way to get a game. This is important to me. I need to track down this retro game because I want to own it, because it's a thing that I want to relive this portion of my childhood, which was just a couple short years before that. It's
But when you hit teenager, that's when you start to think of your childhood as a different era, so you start to have nostalgia for it.
Right. I never really, and still have never really gotten into Super Nintendo or N64 collecting. I already owned a stack of Super Nintendo and N64 games, and I kind of already had the games I wanted, and the NES specifically was significant to me. And I think it's some weird psychological thing where I went through a decade and a half of my brother like deciding when I didn't get to play it, that's why it feels so special to me. I'm like, even as
it's the forbidden system.
Yeah, even as an almost 30-year-old man, I'm like, I can play NES whenever I want because I have my own now,
And also a Retron, and also 3,000 other things you can play fucking NES games.
2 Retrons.
Yeah, right. You have 2 Retrons.
And then I remember it died down for a while. And then what sparked my interest in collecting again was actually Game Boy Advance. It was Final Fantasy Dawn of Souls, the remake of 1 and 2.
Really good remake.
That was the first JRPG I really sat down and played through. The very first time I was ever like, hey, this is like a thing. And I think these may have happened either concurrently or this is like my two timelines, my two collecting timelines. So they may be jumbled up. But I remember playing that and I was like, this is what JRPGs are. This is awesome.
Right.
You know, and it was still, you know, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And JRPGs were still kind of
came out in what, 04?
03, 04, yeah. And this was still JRPGs were still kind of exploding a little bit. You know, Final Fantasy VII started this freight train, but that PS2 era is when they really kind of came to their own.
Yeah, it hadn't petered off yet.
Right.
Which would happen in like 2 years after that.
That's whenever I started exploring this JRPG backlog. Games I've never owned and never cared to own. Final Fantasy VI, you know, Chrono Trigger, the Mana games. I mean, any of those, I never cared because I'd never played them. And then it kind of petered out again.
Then you got a Neo Geo.
It kind of, well, I'm getting to that. Then it kind of petered out again, and where I kind of played some JRPGs and I got some emulators and I was a little bit into that.
Yeah.
So now I'm kind of into like NES collecting and emulators and I'm exploring different games. And then the Wii comes out and Virtual Console happens.
Yeah.
And it's this thing where all of a sudden, let's talk about preserving these games. And these are historic. People started talking about games from a historical aspect,
right?
Which is, if nothing else, that's the legacy of Virtual Console. Finally, people took game preservation, maybe not seriously, but it
came to the forefront.
Up. Yeah, people said, hey, you know, nobody else can play these old games. I mean, unless you have all this old crap that nobody has anymore, because all these companies have gotten rid of it at this point, and the prices are exploding.
Yeah, because the Wii came out shortly after all the GameStops stopped carrying any retro shit.
Like 07 was the first year that I remember being like, why are the NES games so expensive? Why does nobody have anything? What happened? What's, you know?
Well, it was either 05 or 06 that all GameStops just stopped.
Yeah.
Because prior to that, when they still had competition from EB, there were certain GameStops that always carried everything. NES, Super NES, everything but Saturn and TurboGrafx.
Yeah.
You could get at some GameStop somewhere.
Right.
Because there were still some EBs that did that too. And because of that, neither store wanted to completely eliminate it, because then they'd be letting the other store have full run at it.
Yeah.
And then after the merger, they wound that down pretty quick.
Absolutely. But it all of a sudden these games are disappearing from shelves and Nintendo's re-releasing them. So it's that 1-2 punch of like, hey, maybe someone should pay attention to the fact that this shit's going away.
Right.
You know. And
at first, when Virtual Console games first started coming out, I remember the discussion was, how long until all the NES games are on Virtual Console? Nobody
you funny dummies.
Nobody even factored in the idea that, you know, a lot of these can't.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
And a lot of them got put on Virtual Console and then pulled.
Yeah.
You know, Ninja Turtles, SimCity, there's a couple more.
Donkey Kong Country.
What?
Yeah, they had pulled the 3 Donkey Kong Country games from the Wii Virtual Console.
Doesn't Nintendo just own those up and down?
They own them outright. But for some reason they got pulled. They're still on Wii U, but...
After that, the next big... So at this point, I'm into emulators. I'm into Virtual Console. I'm collecting NES hardware. This is when shit gets weird. And this is like... I guess it's been like almost a decade now. It's been several years. Yeah. But I was an adult, and I bought my Neo Geo. Yeah, in air quotes. I bought a Neo Geo. And I bought it, and I don't know that I've ever actually said this because it is embarrassing. I bought it because of a music video.
What music video?
So hold on.
It was CNC Music Factory, make your own music video on the Sega CD.
Listener, if you're sitting at a computer, go on YouTube and look up this guy. He's one of my favorite content creators. His name's Nathan Barnett, and he does a character named Keith Apicary.
Yes.
In Keith Apicary, this character does a show called Talking Classics. It's just a fun, goofy, retro video game.
He was looking for the Dreamcast too.
Spoof show. Yeah, and it's great. He's a great physical comedian.
Yeah.
Anyway, he also has done a couple of songs. And I remember seeing this Neo Geo in a couple of his videos, and I was like, that thing looks cool. That plus Metal Slug? I remember Metal Slug. I played that back at the bowling alley when I was a kid. So it's this thing where I'm already intrigued.
Yeah.
And then he does this music video that I think is just called Neo Geo. And it's just this dumb, goofy music video of him in front of a Neo Geo being wheeled around town and dancing. It's dumb as hell. It's hilarious. And I watched that music video, and then I watched it again and again and again, because he keeps showing the games and stuff. And that's when I was like, I have to own one of these. And Saturn, it was less than a week I owned one. I saw that music video and I was like, I must own this. And
you convinced your now wife that it was a good idea.
Courtney and I we had just started dating. You know, it was a long time ago.
Wait, okay. So shortly after you started dating, you were like, I bought this Neo Geo arcade machine on a whim, and now you're married.
What?
No one understands how that leads into that.
Here's the thing. I didn't tell anybody I was buying it.
Of course not.
And I lived in with my mom.
Right.
Because I moved out when I was 18 and things went south with the person I moved out with.
Yeah.
She was insane.
Happens.
And I moved back home. And so it was, I was an adult living back at home. And it was kind of one of those like failure to launch sort of situations. But I end up back there and I didn't even tell my mom who I'm living with.
It just showed up in the garage.
She just came home and it wasn't in the garage.
It was in the living room.
It was in the spare room and she was like, "What the hell is this?" And I was like, "It's a Neo Geo." And I went from like, "Oh, what is that thing that plays Metal Slug? That's awesome." And then of course I did some reading on Wikipedia. I'm like, this thing sounds great. Because every game collector always wanted to own an arcade machine if you haven't.
Yeah.
But the issue is that you spend all this money and you can play one game.
Right. Whereas the Neo has
it's a
slots.
game console.
Yeah.
And it was like that music video came out and that was it. Like the second I finished watching it like 3 times in a row, I went straight on Craigslist. There's a bunch available.
Yeah.
Which is weird because now there's none. Like you cannot find Neo Geos in this area. I almost bought a Samurai Showdown 2-slot Neo Geo, a Samurai Showdown art on the side. There's like 5 or 6 of them at the time.
Damn.
And I spent...
I guess you just happened to hit at that right moment when everybody was getting rid of arcade equipment.
I guess so. I spent about $500 on it.
Nice.
And it came with Metal Slug 1, Super Sidekicks 2, and Fatal Fury 2.
I love Fatal Fury 2.
And so then this is when it gets worse. So keep in mind, this is all because I watched a music video on YouTube.
Naturally.
Then I joined the Neo Geo forums.
Of course.
Which are not a very friendly place to be, but they're great guys. It's just a bunch of old Neo Geo curmudgeons, but it's the only place to get Neo Geo games.
Right.
Because the Neo Geos were in arcades for so long that bootlegs became so popular, it's the only place to get real carts.
Right.
And I literally joined a forum and started PayPaling money directly to other forum members to purchase these games from a forum.
Right.
This is not the 90s. People didn't buy shit off forums anymore.
Yeah, I did that back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so because of a music video, I'm like $1,500 in the hole at this point. My bank account's like dead zero. To buy a fucking Neo Geo because Keith Apicary had one in a music video and I wanted to play Metal Slug.
You should write to him and let him know what he's done to you.
I like to hope that maybe one day he'll listen to this and he'll know. But it was one of those things where it was almost this like inevitable discovery where I'm like, it plays Metal Slug and other shit. Sign me up.
Yeah.
And so that's where the Neo Geo came from. I do.
And it's just been a downhill slope since then.
It's getting weirder and weirder. Now, because of this show and because of you specifically, I'm into PC Engine collecting.
I am a terrible influence.
And Sega Saturn collecting. Yeah. And so because of the show, I've been investing in those in the last couple of years and really enjoying them. And
PC Engine and Saturn have been my favorite consoles for decades.
They're getting up there for me.
I have loved those 2 consoles for so long.
I don't want to bring up the CRT and the retro game cart thing at all, but I did those.
Yeah, you can go listen to a different episode all about that.
But I do want you to talk a little bit about your history with it before I get into, because I do want to talk about our current collecting plans and where we're going to go from here and what we have going on. But I did want to shift gears and have you kind of...
I feel like collecting came natural for me just because I come from a family of hoarders.
Right. Oh, you mean collectors?
Yeah. So when I was a little kid, my parents still kept the house pretty clean. Granted, they had 3 kids running around in the house.
Right.
They had people coming to visit, either kids' friends or whatever. Mm-hmm. So we kept the house fairly clean. We kept everything somewhat organized. I mean, sometimes some dishes would pile up or whatever, but that's normal when you have 3 kids.
Yeah. I have 1 kid. My house is a disaster all the time.
No, your house is fine compared to my house growing up. Anyway, so we, my mother is a big reader. She loves reading novels. Like the shittier the novel, the more she will enjoy it. Like if it's 50 cents at half price books, or it comes in a shrink wrapped pack of 20 for $3, she will pound through those books in 2 days.
Pound was the wrong word to use there, but
it was exactly the correct word.
She'll flicker bean through the whole stack.
But no, she
found the little man in the canoe and just went to town.
And she is incredibly fast at it. Like, she will read a 300, 400 page novel in 2 hours.
Courtney's the same way. She reads trash novels and just destroys them.
Yeah, and my mother won't sell them.
Yeah,
when she's done. So she had this elaborate system of old egg crates from grocery stores that didn't exist anymore. Like, well, some of them might exist, but not around here. Like, you would see Property of Brookshire Brothers or Skaggs Alpha Beta.
Well, back in the 80s and 90s, everyone had those around their house, and you used them as stools and furniture and whatever else.
And she had them stacked into shelving all over her room, and she had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these trash novels that she would get from the used bookstore. And so when I started playing games, and I got my NES, and you know, I actually the first game that I remember was an issue was we had Dr. Mario. I had gotten it for my birthday, and we had played it quite a bit, but we had kind of gotten in a lull where we weren't playing it so much. And a friend of mine had a copy of Ghosts and Goblins, and he wanted Dr. Mario. I wanted Ghosts and Goblins, so he was like, "Why don't we trade?" And I was like, "That's brilliant."
I'll also throw in my Ninja Gaiden trilogy. Go ahead and take it.
And I was like, this is a thing that we can do. And so we traded, and I'm playing Ghosts and Goblins. And my mom's like, where did you get that? Did you borrow that from someone? I was like, no, I traded my copy of Dr. Mario. And she was like, but what if we wanted to play it later? I was like, what do you mean? We were done. We're done with that. She's like, but what if we want to play it later? And something clicked in my head.
Right.
And I was like, I'll want to play it later. And so, like, the next time we were at the Funko Land or the Game Exchange, wherever we were at, I was like, how much is Dr. Mario?
Right.
And it was like $8 or $10 or whatever. So I was like, we should get this again. Maybe I can trade it again.
Play it later?
Yeah. And so suddenly the idea was in my mind that if I lose this, I'll never be able to play it again. And so once that solidified in my mind, it was over. Right. There was no coming back from that. And couple that with seeing my mom's stacked crates full of books, all meticulously organized, suddenly I had my collection started.
Right.
Because at that point, we had already grown up to 15, 20 NES games.
Yeah.
And this was in like 90, 91 in that era.
That's a lot of NES games for that area.
Yeah.
Usually kids are like, here's all our games, and it's 4 carts, and one of them's a Mario Brothers Duck Hunt because they're normal people.
So as all of my friends started to phase out of the NES and into the Super NES or the Genesis, my mom got the word out that instead of selling to Funcoland, let us know first. And so we started digging through people's games and buying shit.
Right.
And we would give, $5 a cart, which was less than what we'd pay at Funko, but more than what Funko would give them.
Right.
And so suddenly I had like 50 NES games. And the Super NES was still new. I had a handful of Super NES games, a handful of Genesis games. We had shoeboxes filled with games now. And I was spending my weekends organizing
meticulously organizing
and
them,
finding ways to make them look nice and present them.
Right.
And the damage had been done. It was started. I was there.
Yeah.
And suddenly with the advent of the Sega CD and the Turbo CD and really the TurboGrafx by itself, when I would go to the Funko Land and I would look for used games, and they would be like, well, here's the game, but we don't have the case. So we put it in this generic case. Or if it was a turbo game, it was like, well, here's the turbo chip.
Right.
I was like, it won't look as good. When it's next to the others, that's going to look like crap.
It won't look as good as Mom's books.
Yeah. So suddenly it had to look better. I had to have something that looked right on the shelf.
Right.
So already in the early to mid 90s, I'm already obsessing about completion. Like the carts, I can get away with that.
Yeah.
But anything other than a cart.
Well, carts, it's also this thing where, because I was the same way, I never liked generic cases or loose discs or anything, but I also, watched my brother growing up where he always kept everything meticulously, like, okay, here's the manual and here's the box and everything. But NES carts, everyone just had bare carts.
Right.
That's how everyone did it. But there's something that's different whenever you get into disc-based games, and then all of a sudden you're looking at a Sega CD case that doesn't have the cover art, or it doesn't have the proper spine, or it doesn't have the manual, and it's like, well, it's not hard to keep that shit, and now it's gone, and now I'm upset. Because NES boxes are so hard to keep anyway.
Right.
That is, everyone threw them out. It's just the junk cardboard that came with the game.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
So at that point, I already had a ton of stuff. I had already started collecting with cases.
Right.
And that was going into the PS1 era. And I don't know how much you remember about the PS1 era. There was a ton of good games in that era.
Yeah, there's a couple.
And I was in high school.
Like a Irritating Stick.
I do have that.
Pepsi Man.
That was not released in America.
Here Comes Mr. Domino.
God damn. It's No One Can Stop Mr. Domino.
Pardon me. Here Comes Mr. Domino is an unreleased sequel.
Yeah.
It's going to come up with Plumbers Don't Wear Neckties at a library.
Yeah, Art Dink is going to come out with No One Can Stop Mr. Domino 2017.
Did Art Dink make that game?
Yeah, it was made by Art Dink.
Oh, I have Ray Barnholt did a whole issue of Scroll on Art Dink, and it's one of his best. I got to look and see if that game's in there now.
Probably. But no, so with the PS1, I went into it already with collector's mindset.
Right.
Like from day one.
Mm-hmm.
And with the N64 games, for some reason, I didn't take care of them nearly as well because they're carts.
And
whatever.
It was N64.
Yeah, it was garbage system. But no, so
garbage system for babies.
Right. So with my Saturn games and my PS1 games from day one, I was already looking at them from a collector's perspective. When I moved out on my own and had my first job at a game store, PS1 games were already starting to get clearanced out.
Right.
So I was anxiously snatching up as many completed good games as I could. So by the time the PS2 era was rolling in, I had this ludicrous collection of 100 PS1 games. And my older systems were already burgeoning at 60, 70 games or more.
Yeah.
So at that point, I was too invested. I had come too far. I had become the collector.
You can't stop now.
Yeah. And so as every new system came out...
It'd be silly if like all these games and all of a sudden PS2, you're like, loose disc is fine.
Yeah. So as every new system came out, the day that the system comes out, my first thought is, how long do I wait before I go ahead and get a full set of controllers? And what games are going to be important enough that I need to invest in them now, or can I wait and get this one used later?
Yeah.
And every time a new game comes out, my thought process is this one that I want to play today, or is this one that I'm afraid is going to be rare later and I won't be able to play it then?
This mindset has rubbed off on me now since we've been doing the show.
I'm sorry about that.
I own a copy of Nier in the shrink wrap. Never going to play the game. I own Valkyria Chronicles Remake on PS4. I just thought it was going to be hard to find after a while. I just bought Binding of Isaac for a manual.
Yeah.
Like it's
bad because sometimes you just have to stop and think, why am I doing this?
Right.
And every now and then I do. And I'm looking at like a copy of some horrible game on Wii U at a Walmart, and I'm like,
Devil's Third.
Yeah. And I'm like, I know it's on clearance right now for $18.
Yeah.
But who cares?
Yeah.
I will never play this.
Yeah.
And so ultimately I end up forcing myself to put it back. But there's that voice in the back of my head that's like, but what if you want to play it later and it's not there?
And it's your mom's voice.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
What gets me is if I find a game, if I find a good deal, and I'm like I just bought Tenchu 1 and 2.
Right.
I don't like Tenchu. Tenchu's not one of my favorite games. I barely even fucking played it growing up. But I remember being in a game store and staring at the cover art for the first Tenchu and thinking, man, I want this. And as an adult, I spent $20 because whenever I was 9, I felt that way.
Right.
Like
yeah, there's a handful of Super NES games that I've gone through exactly that with. But I've since gone back and parted with them.
Right.
Because there was a couple that I had bought just because there were a handful that were rental store exclusives that I bought because they were rental store exclusives, because I was told at one point that I couldn't own them,
right?
That I could only rent them. So of course I had to go buy them. And so I owned copies of, and I'm ashamed to admit, all 3 of these: Family Dog, Bebe's Kids, and there was Eek the Cat.
Oh God.
All 3 of those I had bought because I was told I couldn't own them.
Yeah.
And later I played them and was like, oh, what is this garbage?
No one should own them.
Yeah,
I will destroy these now.
And I ended up selling them on eBay for about what I paid for them.
Yeah.
But as a collector, there's also that mindset of, well, I at least got to get what I put into it.
Right.
Because I was investing in my collection.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that I was buying a product for me to consume and now I'm going to try to recoup some of the cost of it.
Right.
It was, well, this was a part of my collection.
Yeah.
And it has to be replaced with an equivalent part of my collection.
I have this thing with Courtney because I deal with a significant other and I deal with budgeting money for that because
Whenever you have a child.
Yeah, whenever it was just me, I would just drain my bank account to zero, buy whatever I want, and then eat ramen for a couple days. It's fine. But now it's like, no, well, we need to think ahead and this and that. And we also need to think like, well, what if Courtney wants to buy a thing and whatever? So it's this like game money in, game money out.
Right.
So like if I sold my Neo Geo tomorrow, well, that was game money. Yeah. So that money can only be used to buy more games.
Right.
Because once the money is invested in games, it stays in games, and the money will never return to actual currency ever. And that's the and she's okay with it because she's like, hey, look, it's your thing, it's what you're into, it's your passion, and you're right, you've already spent the money on games, so we're not missing the money now.
Right.
But then I spend new money on games, and the amount of money in games keeps ballooning out. Right. Now I'm like $800 in the hole on Switch stuff, and I'm like, well, that's game money now. Yeah. I took that money from you, and it's game money.
Also, I try not to think of it like this, but there is the fact that the value of the collection does inflate over time.
True.
Which also adds more fictional game money.
There you go.
To the value of your collection.
More game money. I'm going to print up game dollars.
Is there just going to be Jeffrey dollars, but with Jeffrey scratched out?
But it's this thing where like my NES collection, I don't have any super rare games. The rarest game I own, I sold to you, for an inordinate sum of money.
Yeah, that's $100.
This is $100 for
I've spent more
than
than
NES
$100
game.
on a game.
I know, I have too, because I bought Neo Geo cartridges.
That's true.
But it's this thing where this collection that I have is all of a sudden it's worth a ton of money.
Right.
But I'm never going to sell it.
No, good Lord, no.
And that's the weird part is this like, what does it matter what it's worth? I'm never going to sell any of it.
I remember at one point when I was with my ex, I was stressing out at one point. I was like, I owe, at the time it was like $6,000 on the car that I had. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what if I lose my job? I could lose my car.
Right.
And she was like, or you could sell all your games and just pay off your car today. I was like, you shut your mouth.
The sad part is you own some really rare shit. You could sell like 5 games that you don't even like and pay that.
No,
you know what
not
I mean?
5.
I can think of 3 Super Nintendo games you own that are worth over $500 right now.
500, really?
Okay, over $300 right now.
Okay, I don't price games very often if I own them.
You own Demon's Crest?
Yeah.
You own Evo: The Search for Eden.
That was a good game.
You own Earthbound Complete.
Yeah.
All
of those, mind you, I paid less than $60.
You own all the Dragon Warriors.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just saying. You got.
See, here's the thing. I don't price games if I own them.
Yeah.
So I have no idea what those are worth.
I
remember you told me when we first started the show, or just before we started the show, you had said something about Demon's Crest, and I was like, yeah, I got that. And you were like, what? You have that? And you were like, that's so expensive. I was like, what? Demon's Crest?
Yeah. It's a $300 game.
It's a garbage game. Nobody remembers.
Yeah.
And then I look it up and I'm like, when did this happen?
Evo Search for Eden is like $350, $375.
I don't know. That was also a game that nobody looked for.
What about Little Samson? Do you have that?
No.
Okay.
No, I don't have Little Samson.
What about Metal Storm?
No, I don't have Metal Storm.
I thought you had Metal Storm.
I almost bought it so many times back when it was like $20.
It's like $150
I know.
now. Yeah.
But it was one of those things that was like, do I want this?
Yeah.
No, I just want to own it. I don't want it. I just want to own it.
I feel like specifically in recent years, devices, really honestly, my RetroPie has curbed a lot of my purchasing, That and games are just getting so inordinately expensive right now that it's just not worth it.
Yeah, there was a time in the late 90s, early 2000s where I started focusing heavily on emulation.
Mm-hmm.
As I got a computer that I could plug into a TV through an S-video cable, and also the Dreamcast emulation started to pick up, I started to focus a little more on emulation. And I was like, maybe I don't need to keep my game collection. I can just emulate stuff. And the girl that I was dating at the time, when I was first talking about selling all of it, because that was when eBay was starting to pick up, and I was like, I could probably get a couple $100 if I sold all my NES games.
Yeah.
And she said to me, but you're the guy with the NES games. All of our friends, when we talk about old games,
right,
and when we talk about how we want to play DuckTales or Bubble Bobble or whatever, we know you have it, and we can show up and play it here. And I'm like, but we could play that on the emulator. And she's like, it's not the same.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, it was suddenly like, I'm the guy with the NES games.
You know, it's weird having a like a collection you've invested a lot of time and money in, because it becomes a defining feature of you, and it's like, oh yeah, he's the guy that collects video games.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, you enjoy that because that means that anytime anyone has any old video games or anything, they go to you. They're like, hey, do you want this thing? You're like, yes, I do. Like, I got
that never happens to me, by the way.
Yeah, like it happens to me all the time.
Never get that.
I got handed a stack of boxed N64 games complete with manuals from my brother. Both the Banjo-Kazooies, both Zeldas, Mario, like a Hey You Pikachu with the microphone. People just give me shit.
Yeah, that does not happen to me.
And it's great because
I've even tried whoring myself out to my coworkers and being like, hey, if you guys have old video games in your attic, you should bring them to me.
Yeah.
And I will price them for you and maybe buy them from you.
I'll come to your attic and dig them out.
Right?
You're going to do it.
And they're all like, oh, yeah, that's a pretty good idea. I think I got some from when the kids were little. And then I never hear from them again.
Well, I hate when people do that. I had a coworker that was like, yeah, I got a Super Nintendo and a bunch of like RPGs and stuff. You can just have it. And I was like, can we go now?
Yeah.
And he never followed up with me, and I don't want to be the guy that's like, hey, you nonchalantly mentioned that you had a Super Nintendo,
right?
And I've been freaking out about it for a month.
I've been thinking about this thing you offhandedly said 6 weeks ago.
But all I have to say is, Tito, if you're listening, where the fuck is that Super Nintendo? I'll come get it. I don't care, man.
My cousin mentioned offhandedly that they had found a Neo Geo cartridge in the wild in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And it's all I've thought about for a year and a half. I'm just like, I need to go back down there, and I need to see if they still have that cartridge. I need to see if it's in good condition. I need to bring it to Justin, and I need to put it in his Neo Geo.
You told me that someone you know owns a Neo Geo cartridge.
Yeah, that's the one.
Is that the one? Because I haven't stopped thinking about it either.
Yeah. Yeah, and for like a year and a half now, however fucking long
it was
been.
Puzzle Bobble.
Yeah, it's Puzzle Bobble too.
Where is it?
And I'm like, I wonder if they still have it. I need to get it.
Anyway.
But I don't want to just like randomly message my cousin like, hey, remember like 2 years ago when you mentioned that you had that thing that no one cares about, but I really care about it?
Kids, this is what being a game collector looks like.
Yeah, don't do this to yourself.
But my point was
don't drink the marijuana.
My point was that it becomes a defining feature of you as a person. And I struggle a lot of the times with to get a little philosophical here. Things like, do I want my possessions and things like that to be a defining feature of me as a personality? But at the end of the day, it's not that I own the video games.
Right.
It's video games as a whole. It's games, it's design, it's the philosophy behind design. It's what games mean to us as a culture. It's how we interact with them.
As a medium,
and they're just a physical manifestation of that,
right?
And I think that's a better way to think about it than the whole Fight Club, like your things own you, kind of fucking weird nihilism that you can end up at going down that road. Yeah. But I want to talk about now our future collecting plans, and I wrote mine down, so I'll start.
Okay.
I'm still diligently searching for a PVM.
All right.
Diligently. I need a PVM CRT. I have to have one in my life. It will complete me.
Yeah.
It'll complete this box-shaped hole in my heart.
Uh-huh.
Thinking about an OSSC, open source scan converter, which is kind of like the open source version of a FrameMeister.
Right.
I'm like Saturn. I'm minutes away from digging into RGB.
Yeah.
And it's not a rabbit hole I've gone down because it is a very deep rabbit hole.
I am considering getting an RGB cable for my Genesis.
Yeah.
Just because no mod is necessary to use it.
And it's cheap.
And it'll just plug into my FrameMeister.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Saturn is the same way.
I believe so, yeah.
And so for those two, I'm like, might as well.
All Sega consoles, they have great video output options. The sound is just shit. That's well, not all. I didn't mean Saturn. I meant Sega, and I meant specifically Genesis.
Yeah, all Genesis definitely sound like garbage.
As far as like purchasing actual games, I'm honestly not looking for anything. I mean, I've become so accustomed to my RetroPie that games are just too expensive right now.
There's a handful of games that I will always look for.
Mm-hmm.
Every few months, I go back to eBay and I look for Dragon's Curse for Turbo. Because I had a copy. When I was younger, I had a copy of it, and that was one of the ones that got away. And I can't remember if it was stolen or if I got duped into selling it at one point or if I was just desperate. But either way, I don't have it anymore, and it kills me.
Yeah.
And every few months I go on eBay and there's a copy that's like got a couple of bids and it's $40. And I'm like, fuck it, doing it. And I bid on it and it ends up going for $100, $200.
Right.
And I'm like, I'm not doing that. And I keep telling myself someday, then I'll look through the sold listings and like 3 days before I started looking, one of them sold for $70. And I'm like, that was the one. That was me. That was my copy. And so I do that. And then I don't buy it because the price is exorbitant.
I guess on that front, there are a couple games that I'm like, really, it's Magical Drop Pocket, and I don't know why. But I still have an eBay alert, so every day it's like, here's your Magical Drop Pocket listing. So I check them every day, and I'm never going to buy the game.
Right, yeah.
But I'm just like, that's how much that cost today.
And there's a couple of games that are dirt cheap that are like between $5 and $20, which I consider dirt cheap in the grand scheme of collecting.
In a world where games still cost $60 to $100 with DLC, that's still dirt cheap.
Yeah, but there's a handful of games that are in that price range that every now and then I look at them and I'm like, should I get this? No, I'll get it later.
Yeah.
And there's a part of me that eats away that's like, you still haven't bought that copy of Resident Evil 1 for the Wii. And I'm like, I'll get it later.
Yeah.
It's not like I don't own that game on 12 consoles.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm still eyeballing an analog NT Mini.
Yeah.
I still, every couple weeks I go and I look at all the stuff and I'm like, I could buy one of those. And then
I can't bring myself to get that one.
Oh, try to explain to my wife. No, I know I own an NES already. I know I own multiple NESs already.
And
I know I own
Retrons
and a RetroPie and a hacked Wii that plays all this stuff.
Yeah.
But this one's brushed aluminum and it's got Kevtris's
really
HDMI
nice next to my
mod.
iMac.
Yeah, it's a hard sell. One day.
Yeah.
It will be mine one day.
When you sell the Neo.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's it. We do have thank yous this month, but I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to. Of course, we have this month. We have this show. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to cover before.
No, it's a dark, deep rabbit hole, and I'm sure many of our listeners have already gone down that rabbit hole. And for those people, I'm so sorry if I am instigating it in any way, and I'm sure I do all the time. But I do it to you all the time, and I see it happen like after the fact. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't have said that. But it's a problem, and if you haven't gotten into it yet, I strongly encourage that instead you go find a RetroPie, or you go find a Wii, or something that is cheap and manageable, and you stick with that because you can play all the great games that we talk about, and yeah, the legality is questionable. But
who cares?
But who's really making money off that copy of Dragon's Curse?
Well, plus it's this thing where you got in when it was cheap, and I got in when it was still relatively cheap. The initial investment you have to make now just to play some of the games we talk about, it's an insane. And I mean, we're not talking like millions of dollars, but we're talking like several $100s just to get a decent NES collection started.
I was talking to a guy on Reddit just the other day who had just started his NES collection in 2017.
Yeah,
and he was like 19, 20 years old. He was a kid. He had just gotten his first job. He has disposable income. And he was like, I want to get into retro collecting. And I just bought this NES and a copy of Zelda 1 and a copy of Mario Duck Hunt. And I think the first DuckTales and Kirby and the NES and 2 controllers. And he spent like $600 almost. And I was like, kid, try to get your money back.
Yeah.
And go get the Virtual Console. And like all these other collectors were just ragging on me about it. They're like, why would you say that? It's so inauthentic. And I'm like, Christ, people.
Here's the thing.
Look what you're making this kid do.
If you're 19 and you're just starting to collect, and this is my advice to people who are interested in old games, but they're like, I don't know if I want to go the collecting route or just get some badass simulation going. You won't know what is and isn't authentic if you didn't play it when you were 9.
Right.
And I don't just mean played it when you're 9, played it for hundreds of hours when you were 9.
And the thing is, you can sit down today with a CRT as a 19, 20-year-old, and you can play those games, and you might notice some differences. You'll notice that the graphics look a little bit fuzzier. The colors tend to blend together a little more smoothly, so that it doesn't look quite as pixelated. You might notice a little bit less lag, depending on the game. You might notice a lot less lag, and you might notice a little closer connection between the sound and the visual. But that's it.
And if you aren't used to viewing it that way anyway,
it won't matter.
You're not missing anything.
If your first experience with The Legend of Zelda was on Virtual Console, on a Wii, on an HD TV.
That's what you're going to be nostalgic for.
Through Progressive Scan. Yeah, that's what you're going to be nostalgic for.
If you play 100 hours of that, then playing it on the NES is going to feel weird.
Yeah, it's going to feel fuzzy.
Yeah. I do also want to say, if you are someone who wants to get into collecting some kind of hardware and games and you don't want to spend a ton of money, handhelds are still fucking dirt cheap.
Yeah,
and they're getting cheaper.
Also, a lot of Sega stuff is still dirt cheap.
Sega stuff, yeah.
As much as we rag on Sega, there are some great games.
Oh, yeah.
From even the 8-bit era, but especially the 16-bit era for Sega.
Yep.
And for the 32-bit era, which is already grossly expensive. Don't do that.
Dreamcast is
don't
still
get the Saturn.
dirt cheap,
Get
too.
the Dreamcast, get the Genesis or Mega Drive.
Well, no, get a Saturn and play burned games. That's what you should do.
If you can easily obtain a Saturn, yes.
Yeah.
But the I don't know. We have several international listeners, and I would really like for them to respond.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what the market's like internationally for Sega, because over here, Nintendo is disgustingly expensive.
Yeah.
But it was popular here.
Mm-hmm.
Sega was slightly less popular, and it is dirt cheap. Sega was popular in Europe and South America.
Yeah, it's huge.
I have to know, is it expensive over there? So let us know.
Absolutely.
What's the market like?
I don't know that either. I'd be really interested. I know we have listeners in Scotland, England, and Australia. So we got a pretty good smattering there.
Yeah, I would like to hear from them, and also from anyone else.
And listeners in Guam. Hey, guy in Guam.
Yeah.
How expensive is a Genesis there?
Guam is part of the U.S., man.
Is it?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
I know nothing about Guam.
Okay.
I don't even know where Guam is.
It takes U.S. currency.
Where is it?
It's an island in the Pacific.
It's barely U.S.
It's a U.S. territory. But no, anybody, please write in. Let us know what is your experience with collecting, and two, what's the market like in your area?
Yeah. We have had some people from like the Northwest and stuff that still find things at yard sales and garage sales and stuff. And they're like, oh, I got this for $20, and I'm like, fuck you.
Like I happened to go to a garage sale a couple of months ago, and I asked them straight up, do you guys have video games? They're like, yeah. And they show me a bunch of burned CDRs. I'm like, what?
This is Halloween Harry.
I'm like, really? And it was a bunch of PS1 games on burned CDRs. And I'm like, no. And they're like, well, I've got one that's like a legit disc, and it was a copy of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego for DOS.
Anyway, we do have thank yous this week. I do want to mention we have moved back the week that we do thank yous. We previously did thank yous on the last episode that would be released for that month. That was confusing. We're just going to do it on the last episode we record for that month. So it'll be the
Which
first
is equally
episode.
Confusing, but less confusing for us.
Yes, it's more confusing for the listeners because it'll then be the first episode of the next month.
Usually,
and
but not always.
What you're used to having this time slot is Gardening World, but that's been moved back a slot. So anyway.
So if you're planning on watching Bowling for Burgers tonight, that's been canceled to make room for Gardening World.
This is a list of all the wonderful people who give us their hard-earned dollars to help us make the show better and purchase equipment,
very, very, very grateful
and
for that.
Games for review. And yes, we're absolutely grateful. And I'm going to go through all of them now. The list is getting long. First up, I want to thank Dougie McG, Chris Menochi.
I love watching you mispronounce these. This is my favorite part.
Logan Sharp, who's the host of
the show we were on last week.
The Reformed Gamers, pardon me.
There you
go. Justice Allison, Rob Powers. Saturn, you're on this list.
What?
You give us dollars?
Yeah, I do.
Anders Dahlqvist, who has never corrected me, so I assume I pronounce it perfectly. Dean Collins, Nick Mellon, Fidel Suarez, Kevin Donlin, Nick Brown, Michael Winters, our own Andrew Derry, host of Classic Corner, Robbie Cervantes, Keo Killa, who's our friend Jared. You can find him on YouTube. Mm-hmm. Jason Williams, Stephen Joseph Campbell, Fat Daddy. You guys just want me to say weird shit now, don't you? Who wrote this?
Oh my God, please change your Patreon names. Just make it retarded shit that Justin can't pronounce.
Ian Oberschlake, Martin Burke, Sean Stacy, Mike Morse, Andrew Park, Edward Majewski, Grady Haynes, Mike Spinakos, who also has a show, Video Rangers podcast, my lovely wife, Courtney, and Mark Meredith from Australia. So thank you to all those wonderful people for giving us money on our Patreon. If you want to support us on Patreon and get things like Classic Corner, video versions of the show,
and possibly free games,
then you can find that at patreon.com/retrowarriors. You can also find the writing that we're doing at retrowarriors.net, which also has links to our Patreon and our YouTube and our Facebook and our Twitter and my secret Instagram of pictures I take of Saturn mid-show where he's picking his nose and doing embarrassing stuff.
Right.
So please do go check us out.
And reach out to us.
And yeah, absolutely reach out to us. The best way to reach out to us is either directly as a comment on our show on Patreon or through Facebook Messenger if you're so inclined. We do also have an email, which is retrowarriorspodcast@gmail.com. I don't throw that one out there a lot because people don't tend to write emails. But if you want to, it's
what
there.
What decade is this?
Yeah, what
you can
year
fax
is
us. If you message us on Facebook, then both of us see it.
Yeah, it goes to both of us.
It is a shot in the dark as to which one of us will respond these days. And I will usually signify right at the front of the message that it is me responding if I am responding. You never do, which is great if I jump in later, because then it just looks like a ridiculous conversation.
Yeah. Also, we had someone comment, and this is real fast. This is totally out of left field. Someone was asking about that show Video Power. Did you watch that when you were a kid?
Yeah.
What is it? Okay. I told him, I was like, Saturn probably did.
I responded to your response.
Oh, I didn't see that part.
Okay.
I didn't watch it. Anyway, please go check us out, retrowarriors.net. Next week, we are tentatively planning on doing Game Center CX, which is one of my favorite things that's ever been made on planet Earth, and I know you're aware of it.
It's pretty great. I've seen like 2 episodes though.
God,
so I need to catch up on.
You're gonna go through my personal selection of the best of Game Center CX.
And so next week I'll be able to come back and say these are clearly the best episodes because they're the ones I've seen.
These are my top 5 episodes. I've seen 5. Anyway, as always, thank you for listening, and let us cling together.